Welcome back to Against the Cage, your home for all things MMA. My name is Jake Aryeh. I'm joined here by Scott Fontana and Erich Richter. And guys, while we had a solid weekend of combat sports, we have some news to go over of our own. Scott, you wrote a whole column about it. Why don't you tell the people what is new in our world?
Really quick before I do that, you kind of missed some of my other news because I didn't tell you guys. Surprise,
Oh
razors are
my
off.
gosh, let's go, Scott. Look at
Oh,
those pearly whites. Congratulations.
there we go. Thank you, thank you. They're nice and straight, and hopefully my jaw is in the right place now. So that's great.
Alrighty.
Anyway, moving on. Moving on. We have the New York Post Sports MMA World Rankings made their debut this week. Our little trio kind of resolved to produce our own MMA rankings each month that will include fighters from the UFC and other promotions. I imagine we'll be releasing these mainly after numbered events or other maybe major shows in a month, but again, just once a month. Regardless, we're gonna do top tens for each weight class, the same weight classes that the UFC does. And of course, as you guys know, we have some guidelines that we're going to stick to that are maybe a little bit different than you might see with other ranking sets that will determine eligibility. Not too crazy, but too long. Didn't read. If you want to check out my column, you can on nypost.com. But in short, they relate to, activity, wins, if you missed weight by egregious amounts or in successive fights, or if you're on a suspension for anti-doping violations. Those are kind of the things that will essentially exclude you from the rankings. But I think there's something on screen as well that's been running that will also show more clearly exactly what it is that we do and do not do as far as allowed fighters in our rankings.
Yes. So with those guidelines, that obviously helps us, narrow down who ought to be in the rankings, and we'll stand by that. However, each of us kind of has our own freedom to, where there is a gray area, have our own things that we weigh and go into that. So, Erich, I want to talk to you about your individual philosophy, and obviously, Scott, your thoughts as well. But I'll throw it to Erich first. What were some of your philosophies when you were picking your fighters?
Yeah, so I think that Scott does a really good job of laying this out on his column. I believe that it's online, and you guys should definitely read it. The general overall perspective of this, from me at least, is that the rankings that are out there currently just aren't good enough. The UFC rankings are mostly garbage. Like I don't want to really throw everybody under the bus there, but it's just really bad. It's really bad. The people who are doing it either don't watch the fights or don't cover the sport anymore, even. So from that perspective, like when I was doing these rankings, like I was trying to really look at it from a perspective of who have you fought, who have you beat, and what are the common opponents. MMA math is imperfect, and honestly, my rankings are probably imperfect as well. They'll get better as I go along, but I think the most important thing that I was trying to do was common opponents and who have you beat, who have you lost to, and doing the rankings accordingly. Also, like just kick out all of the gatekeepers, right? All the guys that have lost, obviously we have the rule where if you've lost 3 fights, you're not eligible for the rankings anyway. But if you've lost like
Three in
two
a
in a
row,
row,
or if you haven't won your last three, right? You're 0-3
yeah,
or 0-2
yeah, yeah,
one or
yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
Excuse me, sorry. If you've lost your last 3, you're not even eligible. But even if you've lost like your last 2 and you won one, 4 out of 5 or something like that. If you're losing more fights than you're winning in the span of like a 6 fight or 7 fight win streak, like even if you've lost like 2 out of 4, I'm probably going to penalize you pretty heavily for that, and I feel like I did. But yeah, that's my philosophy. Also on box office, there's some hot takes in there, but I'm okay and I'll answer for them.
And we will get to that. But Scott, what were some of your philosophies going into this?
As far as what Eric said, I mean, that's pretty similar to what I had it, right? The fighters' resumes mean a lot. I give added weight to, more recent results as opposed to older results, but those still count, at least especially up until a certain point. And then also, those, again, defeating well-rounded, well-regarded, excuse me, opponents and those head-to-head matchups, those things definitely will differentiate one from another. I also tried to factor in, maybe if you're getting finishes against these opponents in particular, especially if you get higher up as well. But that was kind of lower on my decision tree because a win is a win at the end of the day. And sometimes a fighter is not even trying to get a finish, but they're trying to win in a particular way because that's what needs to get done against a particular fighter. And I don't want to penalize that. So it's not a be all end all.
Yeah, for me, definitely the resume and recent wins, the quality of opponents was a big thing for me, as I'm sure it was for you guys as well. Going off of that, kind of where we start to stray a little bit in terms of what we're, making important to ourselves. Activity was something that I definitely factored in. Time away from the cage or the octagon, I do believe plays, at least for me, is an important thing. And then also, I know it's not exactly the most important thing, but it's something that maybe is like a bit of a tiebreaker for myself, is who I think might be favored over another fighter. If it is
Yes.
close enough for me, then I think that that's something that warranted in, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit when we get to some of our rationales of our different fighters. But now that we have that out of the way, let's talk about some of our controversial picks. Let's nitpick some of this stuff. For all of us, we put Alexandre Pantoja at number one for flyweight. Obviously, didn't learn a ton from that fight, but Scott, I'll throw this one over to you, and let you speak for all of us. Why did you put Joshua Van underneath Pantoja?
Obviously, I think this is the one that is the most controversial that we just all agreed upon, right? But it's also not a surprise because we've discussed this going back to that fight that happened, as brief as it was, 26 seconds, basically nothing happening and no real fight related actions causing Alexandre Pantoja to lose. It was basically a freak accident. Joshua Van is rightfully the UFC champion, and I think that is perfectly okay. But also, I don't think any of us in this conversation actually believe that fight said, well, he's definitely better than Alexandre Pantoja, so he's number one. So I almost look at it as more as like 1A and 1B, Pantoja being the 1A. Because I think Van has done a really fantastic job in the last year of really putting himself there. And a win is a win, but also it's not really a win that says anything. So yeah, I'm good with the body of work of Pantoja still being what gets him number one. And I cannot wait to see when they do finally get to fight for real, hopefully get a real fight in, and then we see for real who is number one.
Yeah, agreed there. Eric?
Yeah, no, I everything that you've echoed. Joshua Van, maybe he's better. I just don't know the answer. I mean, he's the champ right now, but Alexander,
That's what it is.
Pantoja
That's
had a lot
exactly
of.
what it is. You just don't know.
I have no idea. So that's kind of it. Like Pantoja looked like he might be like second flyweight goat over the past like 2 years behind Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. So it's just impossible for me to say that Joshua Van is, the second best flyweight of all time. Like I'm not, I can't be there yet. It's impossible.
Well, not of all time, but
Right. But just Pantoja's just got that resume, and like we didn't learn anything in that fight, so I can't take it away from him.
yeah.
Well, let's talk about some of our each of our individual controversial picks.
Yeah.
Eric, is there one that stuck
Yes,
out to
God,
you?
I got a bone to pick with you. Dan Hooker at number seven. Me and Jake did not have Dan Hooker rated at all, and yeah, I want to hear the argument for Dan Hooker at seven at lightweight for sure.
Sure, sure. Look, I felt compelled to keep him ranked ahead of Mateusz Gamrot, for winning that close fight in 2024. I understand it was very close, right? Like, and you seem to have disagreed in the past with the way that decision went, but I think in that case, it's much different than the Van fight where we actually had 15 minutes to sort it out. Judges did weigh in. We do have a victor there, and I don't think anyone can at least dispute that element of it. You may have your opinion one way or the other, but a win is a win, and I'm treating it as such. So I cannot move him behind Mateusz Gamrot, especially when you factor in Hooker's only two losses since then are Arman Sarukian and Benoit Saint-Denis. These are two elite guys. Gamrot has only beaten Ludovic Klein since then, and he also lost to another elite guy in Charles Oliveira. I'm pretty comfortable with my thought process here. I don't think I can exclude Hooker without excluding also Gamrot.
Fair enough. For me, I did
Now,
exclude them both, so I was like, I guess I
You know
feel
what? There you go.
comfortable
You got a
with
leg to stand on.
reasonable.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah, reasonable. Definitely reasonable. Another one that you had Pitbull ranked at featherweight. I think we all agree that featherweight's maybe not exactly where it has been in years past, but give me your Pitbull. I didn't have Pitbull in the top 10 either.
You know what? I'll tell you this. I think here, this is one where I would have been much more flexible on. You gave me some other names. I could be okay here. I'm fine with what I had, but I do think there's a drop off at featherweight after eight. I think that's where you start to see, okay, maybe some of these guys, even seven, you could potentially make the argument of Yusuf Zalal, maybe a little different too. I'm going with what I have here though. And frankly, I just think he has a good body of work on the whole. He's been doing this for a very long time at featherweight. His recent losses had been at other weights. So other than using Talia Rodriguez, you can't put him ahead of Yair for sure. But I think, that plus winning over Dan Ige, that's a solid win. I don't think his case is distinctly less than, say, Steve Garcia, who I had right after him. And, I look at someone like an Arnold Allen, who you guys both had. He's 1-3 in his last four over the last 3 years. His only win is Giga Chikadze. Chikadze has not had the results either, so I don't know how impressive that victory is to me. I would much rather put Pitbull in here than Arnold Allen.
I definitely see the argument. It's kind of preferential, I suppose, but that's
that's
This
Arnold
is all
Allen
subjective.
yeah.
Yeah, the Arnold Allen performance, I hear you. It wasn't great last time out. I don't have as big of an issue with the Pitbull one. I still have an issue with the Dan Hooker one. You had Paul Hughes off of the rankings, which we'll get to. And Mateus Gamrot, I thought that was a bad decision to begin with. Gamrot was like a -400 favorite in that fight. So yeah, I think that if you just ran
But what does
one,
that have to do
especially
with
the way
anything?
Well,
What
he
does
was
the
a minus,
line
he
have
was
to do with the
expected.
result?
Well, if you were to reline that fight, what would it be? That's the question that I asked myself.
Today, I don't know. I mean, probably much closer than that, but what does that have to do with anything? It's still, they
Not
fought
so
for 15
sure.
minutes. That's what
Well,
matters.
Eric, we're gonna put you on the back foot for something else right now. Let's see if this one still holds to be subjective. Gable Steveson, you put at number 10 at heavyweight. Before we dig into this one, what is your rationale for that? What's your defense here?
I got like 4 words. Heavyweight division, 3 words. Heavyweight division sucks. Gable Stevenson, if he was signed with the UFC, I'd probably have him ranked 6. Honestly. Without having fought. If he was signed to the UFC today. I think that would change it a little bit. But look, we understand what he is and we understand what he is as a wrestler, and we've seen him dominate in LFA. So we it's not like he hasn't fought before. So like that argument, like we've seen him fight, and heavyweight division is it is so bad right now. I stand by it. I think Gable Stevenson. I also had Gable Stevenson as a potential title contender by the year's end. It would be disingenuous for me not to have him 10.
So, before Scott sinks his teeth into this, I will just say as like a preface, I feel like for the rankings, while someone might be favored, because I'm sure Gable Stevenson might be favored coming up against a lot of these guys, and I do echo your sentiment that the heavyweight division is not in the best place it's ever been. I think the resume is not there in terms of quality of wins and ranked opponents. But Scott, I'll let you take it away from here.
All right, before I even get into that, I'm gonna help you out, Eric, because I know you're working on pronunciations. There is no N after the VE in it. It's Steveson.
This is a
So
common
that's
one.
Gable
There you go.
Steveson.
No, I appreciate
That's
that.
a hard one. I'm just going to set you straight. Number one. Number two, this is indefensible. This is not even remotely like sensical, especially based on your own rationale where you go with the resumes here. He has no resume in mixed martial arts. And I think he would tell you the same thing. I'm not saying that he wouldn't beat a lot of those guys, but when you're talking about rankings, you're talking about exactly the resume. You're talking about what has been done. He has done almost nothing. Those wins that he's had on the regional scene, impressive as they may be, they don't even remotely compare to the probably 120 people ahead of him. He is so far off of the rankings, it's not even funny. But if he gets a fight against one of those guys, I'd probably pick him too. That's just not how it works. It's ridiculous that you had him. I can't believe you did that, dude.
He would be favored against every ranked UFC fighter. He'd be favored against everyone besides like Waldo's Cortez Acosta, and maybe Curtis Blades would be close.
But that's not how it works.
Yeah,
Fundamentally, that's just not how it works.
And betting odds are a big part of that. Are a big part of this for me. He's better than almost everybody at the division. And honestly, and by the way, just to bring up this can of worms, I'm projecting out a little bit. I think Tom Aspinall might have to get stripped. His eyes look terrible. So I don't think that he might not even be in the heavyweight division for the rest of the year. I think they're going to probably need a new champion. I think that there's a world where Gable Stevenson fights 3 times in the UFC and is immediately the champion. He's going to roll through everybody the second that he gets here. And we've seen him fight. It's not like we haven't seen him fight. Like, yeah, I have a lot of respect for the LFA fighters. I don't even. It's like it's regional, but it's not that regional. Like it is. It's a really solid promotion, and he rolled through his last opponent in like 35 seconds. And that in addition to his really really incredible wrestling prowess, like Bo Nickel, it was the same thing. Bo Nickel was, arguably could have been rated in the top, 15, maybe not before the UFC because middleweight's an actual division and has real contenders in it. But Bo Nickel was getting all of this love ahead of time, and the only reason that he's not, super highly ranked is because middleweight is a gauntlet. It's the same scenario coming into the UFC. The only issue is that there's real talent at middleweight, and I can't say the same about heavyweight. So heavyweight sucks, man.
It's interesting
it is really
that
bad.
you mentioned Bo Nickel because this was actually going to kind of be like the precedent for me as to like, here's why I wouldn't rank Gable Steveson based off of like how he'd be favored and all that. Because Bo Nickel's like a perfect example of someone who, when he just got to the UFC and was fighting, guys who were not ranked, he was minus whatever. And if you put him up against someone who was in the top 10, he probably would have been favored against some of those guys too. But
totally fair.
We're not going to put him in the top 10 of our rankings at that point, or
totally fair.
Even today, right?
Totally reasonable. The only thing is that, again, middleweight is a legitimate division. Like, it's probably in the UFC, they have probably every top 10 guy. Like, if we look at our rankings, there's only like 3 that aren't UFC. Bo Nickel's won in the first
middleweight
round
in the UFC is actually one of the least secured top 10s that we have. It's actually got 2 from PFL, as opposed to most of the other weight classes have 1 or 0.
Because there's better fighters at middleweight now than there's ever been. Like at light,
compared to heavyweight,
back in the day, like and we've talked about this before. At heavyweight and light heavyweight back in the early 2000s to mid 2000s, all those guys were super undersized. Those like really fun fights at 220 and 210. Those are all happening at 185 now. Like Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira were at the same time at 185, 1 and 2. And look at them now. They like that is like you look at that division over the last 5 to 10 years, it's loaded. Bo Nickel, like that's a really tough spot for him to be in. Not for nothing, Gable Steveson has got 3 first-round finishes. He should be fighting in the UFC within the next like few months. If he's in shape, he should be fighting now.
Scott, final thoughts.
I know he's got a fight coming up.
Gable is 2-0 in mixed martial arts, and if we go by Fight Matrix, he is ranked 390th in the heavyweight division right now. I'm not saying that's exactly where I would rank him if I was to have some knowledge of the top 400 heavyweights, but he just doesn't have remotely close to the resume, which you already outlined as an important part of this for you.
You don't take into account any of his wrestling credentials, because like Brock Lesnar was.
No, I don't. I absolutely don't.
Okay. Well, I definitely do. So
they totally disagree. It's a different sport. It's a different sport.
We've seen this already. With Brock Lesnar.
All right, I'm gonna close the book.
We saw with Pereira real quick. Alex Pereira walked in here as a champion from another sport, and nobody thought to put him any higher than they did. That we didn't feel like we needed to. Now we do.
Kickboxing is different, but yeah.
So
I would have had Alex Pereira higher too.
It seems that there are some fundamental disagreements as far as the criteria. However, we'll talk more about that later off camera, perhaps. Eric, I want to hear briefly, why did you put Johnny Eblen above Costello Van Steenis? Because obviously, as we know, last year Costello Van Steenis beat Johnny Eblen. So I'm just curious your thought process there.
Imperfect ratings. Johnny Eblen won every minute of that fight, and Costello was able to pull the choke in the last minute of the 5th round. Incredible stuff. It's just tough, right? Like that one I really had a hard time with, because Eblen, like if you were to realign that fight again, it's like Eblen would be favored probably, but Costello Van Steenis beat him, even though he lost like almost every minute of that. Like I legitimately think that Eblen won 24 out of 25 minutes, but he still lost by submission, choked out with the rear naked choke. So tough one. I'll go either way one. I won't stand on this hill as much as I would Gable Steveson. Yeah, I just feel like Eblen would be favored if they lined it again.
I took less of a. I still was like surprised by it, but I feel like you can make an argument for this one. Scott, what do you think?
I just cannot condone the use of betting lines and how you line a fight as a guide for ranking fighters. That's just not how it works. Period. And
why not?
I know you're the betting guy, right? But like that's just not how
predictions
work,
right? Like,
and I don't think you're gonna find a lot of people who. But that's not how it is. Pound for pound, Pound for pound is one of those conversations. That's a different conversation. That's more hypotheticals. This is really more empirical and subjective, but they're still empirical. So for me, Costello Mancinas, he may have lost most of the minutes of that fight, but at the end of the day,
Yeah.
not only did he win, he won definitively. So the guy proved on that day he was better, and that's the only evidence we actually have. So as far as I'm concerned, CVS has to be ahead. But I get what you're saying there a little bit more about it. It's like, look, he was doing better in that whole fight, but at the end of the day, no, I think you have to go the other way. That's my philosophy.
I will say, as far
Yeah.
as the favoring thing, because I did briefly mention that as like sort of a tiebreaker for me if we did run into that scenario, but it's not like a pillar of my
Well,
thought
so
process, I
like,
suppose.
I'll just say this: like my tiebreaker for heavyweight, with the Tom Aspinall versus John Jones. Like obviously, Scott, you had John Jones ahead of Tom Aspinall, which is fine. I thought about it, and Tom Aspinall was favored against John Jones in the odds, and that was the tiebreaker for me. Since they were going to fight and then they didn't, that was the tiebreaker for me. Tom's a champ, and Tom was favored to beat John. So, and it was close, as close as it was. I had to go there.
I'll give you the quickest rundown of why I had John Jones there because I don't think we were going to bring it up. I'll tell you very quickly the reason why I put John ahead of Aspinall, and honestly, it's a surprise myself even because I had been thinking about Aspinall as the front for a while, but just the way he looked against Cyril Gahn in that fight, it just was not particularly impressive. And it's not the type of performance you needed when you actually do kind of have a 1A and a 1B option here. And frankly, a 1C if you want to throw Francis Ngannou in that conversation as well, who both John and Francis are still eligible in our rankings for a short time longer. They may not be in much longer. We'll find out. But as it is, yeah, I ended up going there. I just thought the more impressive performance did come from John. He had obviously a fantastic body of work at a different weight class. I have no problem putting Aspinall number one though. If that's what you guys want to do, I had landed there, and again, shocked me too.
Fair enough. Well, Scott, kind of going along that line, what is something from my rankings that surprised you?
Yeah, I gotta ask you about this because it does involve Francis Ngannou here. You have Cyril Gahn ahead of Francis Ngannou, despite the fact that we have a fight between these two individuals, and Cyril Gahn did not win that fight, sir. Explain yourself.
Yes. I feel like I'm sitting on like a courtroom stand right now. So totally hear that. And I also hear that like Francis Ngannou has not lost a fight in MMA in, recent memory since he's been champion, right? He got out of the UFC as champion, went to the PFL, and he still had to win. There's a tough mountain that I kind of have to climb here. However, I will say that activity for me was, pretty important. Cyril fought 2 times, really, if you count the Tom Aspinall fight. He's fought twice since Francis Ngannou had his last fight. I think the quality of opponents that Cyril has faced has been better. So really, I kind of had them neck and neck. However, like you mentioned in terms of your weighing of putting Tom Aspinall below John Jones, I thought that Cyril Gahn looked very good in that fight with Tom Aspinall. And as far as Ngannou, it just does not seem like he has any intention of fighting soon, and for me that leads me to believe that he currently is not in a very active state as a fighter. I feel like Cyril is currently better than Ngannou if they fought right now. It's not a great defense, but that's what I've got right now.
Honestly, I think you've actually got a leg to stand on. I don't know if you really
It's not bad.
explained it as well as I would have if I was you, but frankly, if you just want to say, look, these guys fought 4 years ago, it's
Yeah.
a very long
Right.
time. You just want to go to that. It's like, hey, I get it. Okay, the activity's
I would-
there, the activity's not there, and it's been 4 years. That fight was obviously going one way at first, and then it started going the other way. I can start to fade that victory at that point. I get that, but I'm still going to keep it. I think it's there.
Fair.
I would counter the argument with Francis Ngannou had a blown out knee in that fight and out grappled him bizarrely. But yeah, I mean that's not a terrible
Doesn't say
argument.
much about Gahn's grappling, right?
No,
No.
my God, it's like how's that even possible?
Not so much. Alrighty. Any quick other things with mine that before we head over to our no rankings?
Another one real quick. I was just a little surprised by this, and this one wasn't like I didn't have beef necessarily, but I'm curious why Reiner de Ritter all the way up at 6 right now.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
I didn't even have him ranked.
yeah, I saw that.
Yeah,
So,
that was also surprising.
that was a little
Yeah.
surprising. I think we will get to that in a bit if I'm not mistaken. However, as far as defending putting RDR at 6, I put him above Kaio, and I the reason why I'm actually willing to stand on this one is Kyle Bahalio. His best win in the UFC is against Jared Cannonier, right? As far as Reiner de Ritter's, his best win is against Robert Whittaker. He also has just, he was looking very good before he got beat by Brennan Allen, who I obviously have above him. So between those two, I really just was like, all right, I'm putting Reiner above Kaio. My Sean Strickland is a lot lower than you guys have him, but the reason why I've got him there is his best win is over Izzy, who's not ranked on our list, and then besides
Izzy's
that,
not ranked because of our
I
rules,
know.
though. And I'm glad you brought him up because
Yeah.
he's not ranked because he's lost 3 in a row. Those 3 were all
Yeah.
premier fights, but
Yeah.
we have a rule the way we have it because it's been a while since he won a fight, and I think that's okay.
Yeah.
But frankly, if he beats, if he wins his next fight out there, which who's he going against? Reiner de Ritter, right?
Yeah, I
Against
think you might be
Israel?
right.
Who's his next fight?
No.
Oh no, it's
he's
Kyle
fighting,
blanking at
Bahalio. Kyle
No, it's
Bahalio is
Joe
fighting
Pyfer.
RDR.
It's Joe Pyfer.
No, but
That's
yeah,
Izzy.
Joe Pyfer, thank
Yeah,
you.
that's what I said.
Even if he goes out and beats
Fluffy
Joe Pyfer, who we
Hernandez,
do not
sorry.
have ranked.
Strickland's
No, but-
fighting
but-
Fluffy
but it-
Hernandez.
Yes, he is. But listen, even if Izzy goes out there and he beats Joe Pyfer, who I don't have ranked, none of us have ranked, right, I'd feel very comfortable still putting Adesanya pretty far up in the rankings once again.
Yes, so I think that's, at least for the Strickland thing before we wrap up, it was tough to place him because the guy that he does have his victory over, I didn't have a place to put him either, So I guess that was, now that we
Understood.
have them, we'll have a clearer place to go forward. But let's talk about some of our no rankings. Scott, you mentioned beforehand you did not have Paul Hughes ranked. Talk me through that one.
As far as Paul Hughes, look, he's talented, right? He really just has not done much at this weight class of note other than a victory over AJ McKee, who's really a featherweight, and he's back down at 45 since that fight. Also, just look, he has 2 impressive performances and a losing effort against Usman Nurmagomedov, a fantastic fighter in his own right. But I don't know. There are tough decisions to be made at lightweight, and I felt pretty okay keeping him outside of that top 10. I look forward to the opportunity to see him fight more top guys consistently other than Usman Nurmagomedov and prove that he belongs there because I think he probably does, but the results aren't there.
Yeah, this one I'm okay with. Eric, I know that you're a big Paul Hughes guy. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like Paul Hughes. I definitely would have had. I already said that I hate the Dan Hooker rating. If obviously I did have my own rankings, I wouldn't have had Hooker in there, and I would have had Paul Hughes in there. And I think you make a good point about the matchmaking. Like, I guess you can only fight who's in front of you. I think we all think really highly of Usman Nurmagomedov, and he fought him to a split decision. So I give him some credit there at least. And then the AJ McKee win is you make a good point about the weight class. And then a lot of his other ones were cakewalk. So I understand the strength of schedule. I guess you can only fight who's in front of you. And we all agree that he's super talented. The Dan Hooker one's tough because, I think that Paul Hughes would be a better, I just think he'd be a better fit for rankings. And Dan Hooker got
Ask
some
me who
pretty
you think would
generous
win
splits.
between Paul Hughes and Dan Hooker.
I think we know the answer to that.
Oh,
Ask me.
I think you're going to say
ask you-
Paul Hughes.
No way. You think that Dan Hooker would beat Paul Hughes?
No, definitely not.
Oh.
But I think the resume is
okay.
better. That's what it is.
See, there we
No,
go.
no, no.
That's, yeah.
I fall back immediately on the resume consistently and every time. That's how I'm going to do it. Like it or not,
Well,
that's the way it's going to
this
be.
is
And
the
I
difference
feel
in
solid on
philosophy.
that ground.
Here's the thing about the resume thing, though, is that all the good fighters are in the UFC. So, all the PFL guys are immediately at a massive disadvantage. So, you can't lead. I don't know. In terms of
Not necessarily,
in terms of
because if you beat
criteria,
the ones that
resume
they've
can
beaten,
only-
then you kind of you steal their chi a little bit. You be the man to beat the man. You got to be the man. And he
Right.
just hasn't beaten any real guys there. Other than, again, AJ McKee, very impressive fighter, but he's really more of a 45er.
No, I agree with you, but there's not a lot of good fighters outside of the UFC. Like PFL has a few, but it's tough, man. You can only beat who you fight, and Paul Hughes has beaten everybody besides Usman Nurmagomedov, who we all think super highly of. So it's hard.
That is the tricky part about ranking guys and gals
Yes.
outside of the UFC's
100%.
borders. But and I think you can recognize talent. It certainly is subjective. I have no hate with you guys putting Paul Hughes in there. It's pretty valid, but I didn't go that way. That's okay. But let me ask you, Eric. I actually want to ask you about another fighter you left unranked, and that is Brendan Allen. That
Yeah.
surprised me because Jake and I have him in a let's say a higher level of esteem. I have him sixth. Jake has him fifth. You left him off altogether. Explain that one, sir.
Yeah, that one is tough too, because like again, these weight classes are freaking loaded at this level. So a lot of good fighters to choose from. You have the Borjalio, the Kyle Borjalio loss, Anthony Felipe Hernandez loss. I wasn't a big Reiner de Ritter guy anyway, so it was like he lost that. Like he beat Reiner de Ritter, but I didn't have Reiner de Ritter ranked. So like in terms of resume, I look at it, it's like you beat Curtis, you beat Chris Curtis, you beat Marvin Vittori, and you beat Reiner de Ritter. None of the three I'm really too enthralled with. Like Paul Craig. The three
But
losses, or the two losses, excuse me, to Hernandez and Nasruddin Imavov. Um, Brennan Allen's been here for a while. He's been around for quite some time, but two losses to Chris Curtis is tough for me.
I didn't want to cut you off because I don't want to let you go because I didn't want to interrupt you. But the one that kind of gets me here is why you would rank Paulo Costa ahead of him. You have him in your top 10, but not Paulo Costa, as we were talking about the other day. He hasn't beaten an active fighter who's still active today during his UFC run, except for when
Roman
he just
Kopylov
beat
not
Roman
active?
Kopylov. I
Oh,
just
Roman
said
Kopylov.
that.
He beat Roman Kopylov. Oh,
But that's
well, he
it.
beat Roman
Roman
Kopylov.
Kopylov isn't remotely near our rankings either. Every other fight he loses.
Yeah. Well, he beat Roman Kopylov like clean, and then the Sean Strickland was really close. And
Sure.
Sean Strickland, Sean Strickland, I still have ranked number five, and that was a split decision, super close fight. I mean, the Luke Rockhold fight wasn't great, but I don't know. I think that Paulo
At the end of the
Costa's.
day, it's not going to matter much longer because Costa is moving up to 205. He's one of those guys that will take care of itself. But I am curious who you would put in once he's gone. So we'll have to see.
I will say your
Yeah,
defense
that one is
before.
another one where it's like, where would I rate, like if I were to see them fight, like what the odds would be? I think it'd be really really close.
Yeah, I will say your initial defense of taking aside Paulo Costa about RDR. It's like similar to kind of like me not having Hooker and Gamrot in there. It's like if you didn't have RDR in there in the first place, I kind of understand where your head's at with that one.
Yeah,
Um,
he's been in the game for a long time, no doubt. And no disrespect to Brendan Allen. Maybe he'll make it on the next round once we have some, a little more clarity and some fights happen here. But for right now, I'm leaving him off.
Fair enough. Eric, is there anything on my list that you're confused as to who I left off?
Yeah, I've always been a big Curtis Blades guy, and you didn't have him in there. And I will talk about this past weekend's fights, but Rizvan Kuniev did not look good against Shelton Almeida. Him being ranked at heavyweight stuff.
Yes. So
Again,
And
heavyweight
Blades
sucks.
just beat him. Just beat Kuniev
yes.
Yeah.
So
last summer.
I'm gonna try and make this as like pointed as I can. So for me, I didn't have Curtis Blades or Rizvan Kuniev, of course, in my rankings beforehand. Peeling back the curtain a little bit before this weekend, we all had our rankings in order, prepared to go so that we could change things, when the weekend did happen. I had Jelton Almeida in there. I believe I had him at, let's say, 7th. I can't remember exactly where I had him, but I had him in my rankings. Rizvan Kuniev and him fight. Obviously, we know who comes out on top. I'm like, okay, I have to put Kuniev in here. That does not mean that I have to. I'm only putting Kuniev in here because I have to. I had Almeida in there. He bumps him out. And in my head, I'm like, I'm not adding anyone else to this list just because they have a win over them. But maybe that was just me being too stubborn. Does that make any sense? I feel like it wasn't a
I
prerequisite.
think that you were definitely being just a little stubborn with the idea of it. I think what happens sometimes if a person falls out, because I did rankings. As I've talked about on the show before, I used to be part of the UFC's ranking panel when it had a much bigger and more diverse and frankly more prestigious voting panel. So not that I was necessarily the one bringing all the shine to it, but I was a part of that in those days, and I had a lot of experience doing this. Maybe sometimes I didn't get it right, maybe I did, right? But one thing I did learn is that, look, if someone loses and they fall out, you don't necessarily have to put the person who beat them in there, especially at those lower levels, because there's a lot of indeterminateness. You can just say, okay, who has a good resume that really ought to be there next? So, hey, feel free to mea culpa and just change it around the next month we do this. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
Both of you guys, and me too.
yeah, potential. I probably won't back off of Gable Stevenson, I'll be honest, but
Oh, no.
maybe some. Yeah, I stand by,
Okay.
dude. I'm not gonna have I refuse to have Rizvan Kuniev ranked in the top 10 heavyweight in the world. Oh no
You don't
way.
have to.
He has
There's other
not looked
people.
good ever.
Well,
I can
guys,
name 35 heavyweights that belong there instead. That's
guys, let
fine.
us know in the comments what you thought about our rankings. Let us know about Gable Steveson. That's definitely going to be a continued topic of debate when we do these every
I
monthly
stand on it.
rankings or so.
He's
So
better than all these guys.
make sure to read Scott's column too. But guys, let's talk about this past weekend of combat sports. PFL, they had their card in Dubai. Usman Nurmagomedov being the man headlining the card, beating Alfie Davis by submission, arm triangle choke in the third round. Eric, I'm gonna throw this over to you. Obviously, Usman, dominant guy in the division. Kind of gotten a lot of the names in there. What fight would you like to see next? If his last fight, which he only has one fight left in his current contract, according to reports in his PFL deal, who do you want to see him fight next?
Man, this is a tough one. So just to get into that fight really quick, Usman Nurmagomedov is so freaking good. Like there isn't a real guy at that division that can really compete with him. So that's like number one. And the finish there with the grappling, like his ability to like kind of really dive in and get finishes is pretty impressive. Now for what we have next, there's really not a whole lot at there for him in the PFL. So, I know he has one fight left on his deal. I'm not sure when that fight's going to happen. But like it's tough, man. I don't know exactly what to do with him. I think that his contract's going to be up at the end of this, and maybe the PFL just holds him out. Like how like the UFC kind of did that in the past with like Nate Diaz. Like I think that that's possible, where like the PFL really just doesn't want to lose him, and maybe that fight doesn't happen for a while. So I'm kind of going like odd take here. I think that there's a chance that he doesn't get a fight for a while, and they try to negotiate with him and Ali. I think that's totally possible.
Interesting. Scott, what do you think?
I wouldn't rule that out necessarily, but to answer the question more strictly, if I think there what a last fight for him, I'm gonna give you Archie Colgan. I think he's a solid option. He's pretty much the only option. He's unbeaten, 13-0, picked up a nice win over JJ Wilson last fall, who we kind of thought of as somebody who might make an impact during the tournament format that we talked about last year as well. He got hurt, didn't happen, right? So Colgan getting a win over JJ Wilson, I thought was nice. He's actually number 2 in PFL's own rankings, which they have started doing, and I think that's okay. I don't. You can agree or disagree where he belongs, but frankly, he makes sense up there as at least another option because Usman already is 2-0 against Paul Hughes, like we said. He just clearly beat
Yeah.
Alfie Davis, like we said. He's probably not going to fight his teammate Gaji Rabadonov, so I'm
Right.
gonna say it kind of has to be Colgan.
Yeah, it seems like the plans are kind of already laid out for them if that's what they want to do.
Cleared out the division. So I don't know what like if the PFL loses him, it's like man, like they really lose a big depth of talent at the top of that division. But yeah, you make a good point. JJ Wilson would have been interesting too, but I'm not sure where his injury rehab is.
Yeah, and he's
But
got the
again,
win
he
over.
Colgan just beat him. That's what I said. So that would be the
Right.
part that makes more sense, right?
Yeah, so I mean, those are really kind of the two options. It sort of seems like we'll see what ends up playing out for him. That's going to be a very interesting storyline to follow this year. But another very interesting storyline is the PFL itself. As we mentioned last week, we're going to talk about some of the big changes that have been happening in PFL, and there are quite a few of them. I'll read some of them off here. There are no main tournaments, seasons like we have seen from them in the past. No regular season that leads up to the tournament. No big tournament like Thad Gene won last year in the welterweight. There are still some for PFL MENA as well as Africa. Some of the regional stuff. Whole new change of regime. Don Davis is gone, all that stuff. The new faces are running the show. There's more of an emphasis on in-arena experience. There's rankings so that people could follow along with all of that. And they're doing, more global events in the U.S. and around the world. Scott, I'll talk to you on this one. What do you think is the most interesting element out of the many that I just named there?
I think it's just to sum up sort of what you said, it's the conversion to a full-on traditional MMA organization now. They have 16 main shows, right? If you don't count those the regional tournaments they're doing with Africa and MENA. I think that was a perfect call. I like the number two. It's only, it averages out to one or, some occasionally two a month. They just had their first show in February, so they didn't have one in January, but they'll double up here and there. But frankly, I think it's a nice cadence to it. You don't want to have too many if your roster isn't massive. They don't have a massive roster, but I think they have a nice roster of what they have. I think they're looking to add more talent too. The gimmicks are gone, right? That I think is a nice thing. It's a good way to go. I think they would be best served though to when they do these, try to put them on weekends where maybe the UFC is not putting its best foot forward or putting any foot forward. Like, why do your show last weekend when you could have done it
Right.
this weekend when almost the entire MMA landscape is like barren for Valentine's Day? I mean, not everybody wants to take their date out. Sometimes they just want to watch people punch each other, and that's okay too. Why not make that available? I think that would have been better. Nice afternoon of that from Dubai. You can watch at home. But yeah, this is basically like a revival of the Strikeforce model that's more fleshed out with better prelims and fewer stars at the moment too. But I like that. I think this is a good start, a good way to go.
100%. Eric, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the decisions by the PFL. Like, obviously, their main goal here is to make a consumable product that they can sell to a TV distributor. That's it. The rest doesn't matter. Until they're able to do that, though, they're going to have issues. So, just from that perspective alone, the PFL's they got their work cut out for them over the next year. I don't know when their TV contract ends or anything like that. I know that they're on ESPN Unlimited right now, but that you could just see all the changes that they're making are all focused around getting a TV contract. Because if they don't, PFL might not exist in 2 years.
I
Just to
believe by
be,
the end of the year is when it's over.
and
Off
if they don't get a deal, if they don't get a deal that makes them a decent amount of money, PFL might be they would be in dire straits if they don't get a good TV deal. That's just the reality.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. For me, I think it's the rankings, and for me, I think that's the biggest thing. Because like, if you're trying to sell a fight to someone, it's like this is our number 5 guy versus our number 4 guy. If you don't know any of the names in PFL, and you're just someone who's kind of looking to expand from the UFC, watching the UFC, it's tough to know who these guys are and why this fight's important without that. So I definitely can appreciate that. But Eric, I'm gonna throw this one back over to you. As far as the market in the U.S., obviously they have announced that they're doing more global events, but for people in the U.S. who, the majority of that market is held by the UFC, how can PFL grow? What do you think?
It's so funny, Scott, that you were like saying like about the regional shows and stuff. How expensive are those shows? Is the question that I have. How much money are they investing into those regional shows, and what's the squeeze? Like we have talked about, like the PFL Africa shows this past year, dude. We didn't know. In a lot of the cases, we didn't know a single fighter on any of them. Um, and I understand that that was like a point of emphasis, and maybe you don't want to admit defeat on the investment, but I think that those are really expensive to put on, and I'm not sure that that's worth the squeeze. I would probably be trying to go like closer to like again, I know they bought Bellator and that was a failure, but maybe go towards the Bellator model where like they're kind of like getting some bigger name fighters rather than maybe throwing their investments into PFL Africa shows and again, I don't know how well they do in Europe and overseas. Maybe they do really well. I have a hard time believing that. And I think it's really expensive. From my perspective, I would just really focus on the US audience, bigger shows, and try to get a TV contract. Like, you're not going to get a TV contract running PFL Africa. You're just not. And if that's your main goal, you really have to invest into the USA. And, just don't invest in Jake Paul and Francis Ngannou, I guess is the end discussion and actually get contracts with the Bellator fighters that you just bought. But they kind of blew that already. So they're in a tough spot based on poor business decisions that they've already made.
I mean, I wasn't saying much about the regional stuff. I was talking about more of those global shows, the 16 global shows. The other regional shows are those other 8. And those I think those are pretty much viewed as almost like a separate, much smaller product that look, I'm not familiar with the books of PFL, not privy to that, but also I have to think that if they're doing Middle East, North Africa, that there's probably some sort of money out of the Middle East, North Africa region that's making that a lot easier for them to do and possibly the motivation to do it at all. So I'm not worried about that money, and I don't think that's going to factor in much to their TV deal. But to your point, though, the TV deal is huge. They need that TV deal to be able to grow in this market. They need to be somewhere that's visible. ESPN Unlimited is not that. You saw how gleefully fight fans ditched ESPN services as soon as they could to go over to Paramount Plus. They are sick of ESPN's platforms for fights, and I don't know if the ESPN feels the same way. I'm sure if they would put it on a more visible platform, it would be fine. But I think they'd probably be better served finding somewhere like Prime Video, which has history with combat sports, or even like Peacock or HBO Max, which is a place where Bellator had landed after PFL purchased it. I think if they could land somewhere like there at a platform maybe more people have, they might grumble less about needing to add so that they could watch it. And I have to thank CEO John Martin, who just was installed at the end of last year. He's a TV guy, TV background. He knows that realm. He knows what they want. He knows what they need. He knows people in there. I have to think he knows what's going on. And he seems like a steady hand at the wheel, too, from what I've seen in interviews. So I'm curious to see where they go. But I do think they're going to be able to find a way to find something that works for them.
Yeah, I've heard some stuff about John Martin, like you mentioned, being a TV guy. It seems very clear what their goal is. Real quick, as far as the U.S. market, I think you just gotta. I would recommend just putting on fights in U.S. cities with people that U.S. markets would like to go watch. You know, which I think Scott earlier you'd mentioned to me in prep that they are doing some of those cities. I think that's the way you do it.
You got Pittsburgh on March 28th. I'm looking at my little calendar here. You've got Chicago on April 11th. You got Boston April 16th. So you got 3 upcoming shows in Northeast corridor cities. I think that's probably a great place to start there, Jake.
All you got to do is get fighters that people want to see.
Yeah,
Like you have to. So
that is key. They do need to get some more notable names, especially some crossover names. It's hard. That's the hardest part, to get those guys free of the UFC and then wanting to come over. It's an extremely hard thing for them to do, but that is almost going to be necessary.
You would think that it wouldn't be that hard because they bought all the Bellator guys, but they totally botched that. So it's like it's hard to be like what was that?
It was different management. This is a new era. They've got to take over for what they have, right? They can't control what happened before. It is a very new regime. Just it's almost like the entire thing cleaned house.
Yeah.
Yep, they had to.
Alrighty, well, let's talk about the other thing that happened over this weekend, UFC Apex. Oh, sorry, Meta Apex. Pardon my French. Back at the warehouse.
The Mark Zuckerberg
Mario
Apex.
Bautista.
Just Apex.
Just Apex. Let's call it the Apex. Mario Bautista coming away with a decisive win, submission over Vinicius Oliveira. And Scott, I'm going to throw this over to you. Did this victory tell us anything that we didn't already know about Mario Bautista?
I think it showed that he can be a finisher even now that he's reached a more challenging tier of opponent. Even though, look, I don't know that Vinicius Oliveira was truly one of the top bantamweights in the world. He felt like he was fighting down a little bit. Maybe almost like hey, listen, I know we fed you to Umar Nurmagomedov last time out. Maybe we'll give you some of the I don't think that's why they did it, but it kind of looks that way, right? And look, maybe Loke Dog was injured coming in, right? So maybe he's compromised. He's not fighting the way he's supposed to be fighting. But even at that, we've seen injured fighters be able to go the distance. Bautista didn't do that. He took it out. He didn't even go into round 4 or 5 for a non-title main event. He got it done pretty quickly, took care of business, and I think that does say something. It's his first finish in 3 years.
Eric, how about you?
Always been bullish on Mario Bautista. I like his activity and I like his grappling. I like his volume. So it was just like you said, the only thing that I just wanted to see, I wanted to see him get a finish. I actually wasn't sure that he would even get one. Vinicius Oliveira with the injury, like some call it excuse, some call it like, why were you even there to begin with? But you also have to get your purse money. The sport's kind of a disaster in terms of that, like dealing with injuries and stuff like that. But just to echo like what you said, like it's good to see him get a finish. It's bad to see Vinicius Oliveira say that he was injured 2 months ago and shouldn't have been in this fight to begin with. But it was very good to see Mario Bautista get a finish. I thought he looked awesome in the grappling, and he like kind of just he looked more urgent and like kind of fighting angry, which you haven't seen him really do too much of. So to see that kind of like willingness to get out there.
That's a good shout. A little more emotion in there, I thought. You're right.
Yeah.
That finishing sequence was awesome. Like
he was like it wasn't one of those 100%. Like it was like multiple submission attempts. Like I like to see multiple submission attempts. Like really, I'm trying to get you out of there. I'm not trying to accumulate volume. It was more of like an emotional fight for him. And I thought he did a good job.
100%. Let's talk about Scott's favorite flyweight, Mr. Kyoji Horiguchi.
The Gooch!
We're going to get your thoughts second, Scott. I'm going to throw this back over to Eric. This guy's been calling the title shot since he got that first win, or since he got that win over Tagir Ulanbekov. He's calling for it again. Do you think he should get that title shot like he's been clamoring for?
Yeah, as long as Alessandro Pantoja is out for the extended, future here. The problem is that Alessandro Pantoja and Corey Horiguchi are in the same camp, so they're very good friends. I don't know if they'd be unwilling to fight each other or willing to fight each other. I'm not 100% sure, like how that would play out. I believe that they were asked that in the past, but regardless, I don't know if Horiguchi would even want the title shot over Pantoja if Pantoja was imminently coming back. But say Pantoja's out.
Horiguchi was saying
into
he
the
would
summer.
fight Pantoja. That was when we thought that
He would.
Pantoja was still going to be the champion. That was the whole thing about his last fight. He was like, "Yeah, I'll fight him."
Right. I'm not sure how much the injury changes it, is what I'm saying. Like, if Pantoja's like due back in April,
Would they
then yeah,
would they need a title on the line for that fight? Is that what you're saying, basically?
Yeah, exactly.
I bet they
Because like
would. I bet they
Pantoja's next
would.
fight has to be the title. Pantoja's next fight has to be the title. So it depends on what Pantoja's like recovery timeline is. If it's July, Horiguchi title shot, May, June, whatever, get him in there. But if Pantoja's out into the summer, Horiguchi title shot all day. If not, Pantoja should be next in line. But there's no roadmap, in my opinion, that Manel Kape or Tetsuya Taira should be fighting for a title ahead of them, ahead of either of those two. Horiguchi ran through his two opponents, like absolutely ran through them.
Scott, what do you think as far as I'm curious? Well, before you go, actually, excuse me, Tatsuro Taira. I feel like before Horiguchi, he might have been the guy,
Yeah.
or and actually, no, Manel Kape's in there. I'm gonna throw this over to you, Scott. Make sense of this for me.
All right, I'll while you sort out your thoughts, I'll tell you
Yeah.
honestly. I actually say no for the title
Mm.
shot for Horiguchi next, and that might surprise you.
Yeah.
I've been a big fan of watching him fight for more than a decade now. He's been a fun guy to watch as he developed, and now he's in the later stages of his career. But I do think because there's just such a glut at 125, he just needs to beat somebody who's in that more elite tier. I don't know that we look at Amir Albazi that way. He had that controversial win over Kai Kara France a couple of years ago. The decision went that way. Not a lot of people felt super strong about that one. It doesn't matter anyway. It's been many years now. He's actually on the verge of falling out of our rankings eligibility. Now we have him there at Albazi. So I would like to see Horiguchi get another fight against someone who's in that upper tier. I'm not saying he couldn't beat him, but there are guys with, I think, better resumes of recent activity in the UFC, and that's because, of course, he came back after a long absence from it. I don't want him to wait too long because he's getting a little long in the tooth and had a lot of mileage on that body and a lot of mileage on that career. Having said that, I do think he can probably get there. I want to see it first. Let's clear it out a little bit. Get him another fight. Get him in there quickly. I mean, he had a quick turnaround here. This is only 2.5 months.
Mhm.
Maybe do it again. Get him back there in like May or something like that for like a potentially even a number one contender fight. I'm cool with that. I could live with that.
Before you go, Jake, really quick, one thing that I would just say, Kyoto Horiguchi is fighting in the same camp as Alejandro Pantoja. I feel like Horiguchi is getting all of the attention from coaching right now, and I think that we're seeing him really make good on all of that training. That's why he had such a quick turnaround, is because he is just getting all of the attention. Alejandro Pantoja is definitely helping him every day, and I think that quick turnaround for Horiguchi here will be important too, because he is just sleeping, and breathing this stuff, and Pantoja and him you see videos online of Pantoja helping him through different positions and stuff. So it's good to see.
Yeah,
It is beautiful to see.
for me, I'm just curious because if we're talking about Kyoji in the title picture, the other two guys, if you're not going to go with Kyoji, it's got to be between Tatsuro and Manel Kape. And my first thought was that Tatsuro Taira, maybe because he's Japanese. I feel like they kind of want to put on an event over there in Japan. I believe I remember Dana talking about that in the post-fight presser. But then
it's an idea they like for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know that it's gone anywhere yet, but maybe. Who knows?
yeah, but then you've got Manel Kape who knocked out Brandon Royval, so I think that counts for a lot. I'm curious, Scott, who do you think has the leg up between those two guys?
I would think that especially if they can do it in Japan, it's going to depend heavily on that. If they can secure a Japan date that they like, I think 100% it's just going to be Joshua Van against Tensuro Taira.
Yep.
It's not going to be Kyoji Horiguchi. It's going to be Taira who gets the inside track there. So, yeah, I would say definitely. If it's not for that, I could see Joshua Van against Manel Kape if they want to do it somewhere else. But there's a lot of ifs here. I don't know. We'll see.
Concur with that, Eric?
Horiguchi fought Manel Kape back in the day in Rizin. I mean, that
Yes.
was almost 10 years ago, but
Well, let's get to.
It's an old win, but it's a win.
It's a win. I don't know if I'd count it on my rankings, but it's an old
I don't think I would either.
Well, guys, let's close up this card of the Apex by finishing on Jilton Almeida, who, Eric, you were tweeting up a storm the other day about this fight.
Social media.
Obviously not the most entertaining or captivating fights, and then it's another one from Jilton Almeida that kind of has gone like that, a loss that was really not super fun to watch. Do you think that it was the right call for the UFC to release them as you kind of called for in your tweets after losing to Rizvan Kuniev?
Yeah, I thought it was just, Jonathan Almeida kind of reminded me, and I'm trying to remember, I believe it was when Jose Aldo fought, I believe it was against Merab Dvalishvili. I could be wrong, but it was just nonstop takedown attempts, and then Jose Aldo would go against a cage and do the yawn. Almeida was kind of doing that, but you're Jonathan Almeida. You're not Jose Aldo. You cannot get away with that. No activity at all. Rizvan Kuniev was just leaning up against the cage, digging his head into his throat, and that was it. There was nothing else happening in that fight. Almeida's unwilling, and looking at the refs too, hey, why don't you move it, while he's holding onto his gloves so that he can't throw punches. It made no sense. Look, if you don't want to be there, nobody's making you. And at the end of the day, it looked like Jonathan Almeida didn't want to be there. Unfortunately, if just because you don't get a takedown doesn't mean that you can't do anything for the rest of the fight. His striking actually didn't look bad in the third round, but he needs to prove that he wants to be there. He needs to prove that he can make light heavyweight consistently. He has a lot to sort through in his career if he wants to be here. If you want to be here, you have to prove it. And it's unfortunate too, because it sounded like he just signed a 4-year deal, a 4-fight deal with the UFC, and now they cut him loose. So, unfortunately, optics matter, and if it looks like you don't care, the UFC is going to say, then we don't care, and you're gone. And he deserved to be cut. That was embarrassing. Bad for the product, bad for him, nothing good about it.
What say you, Scott?
I think what happened was Jilton Almeida got Jilton Almeida by Rizvan Kuniev. It was very much an anti-fighting strategy that defeated someone who we've criticized in the past, very recent past, for anti-fighting. And that's unfortunate because, frankly, Jilton Almeida, if he goes out there and he actually has a decent victory over Alexander Volkov, we're talking about him as almost like he is the number one contender at heavyweight, which is a ridiculous world to live in today. And frankly, he needs to get right. I think the UFC made the right call, even though this is someone who has beaten pretty consistently top 15 heavyweights. I think he is a top 15 heavyweight. He was going to go down to 205. Would that have saved his career? I don't think so. But I'll tell you what I think actually could save his career is if he can find himself another camp, another coach, someone who could really unlock some of the aggression we do see from him. There is aggression. We've seen finishes. He had nice first-round finishes against Sergey Spivak, Alexander Romanov, Jairzinho Rosenstrike. I know two of those guys aren't in the UFC anymore, but it's not because they're not good enough. They cut them loose for various reasons or let them go for various reasons to other places. 100%. So, look, there's tools there. A good coach can unlock him. And I think if he goes out there and picks up a couple quick wins on the regional scene, he has the ability to get back and maybe compete at 205. But he's 34. Don't forget that. That's the magic age is kind of 35 for the UFC oftentimes. You got to hurry, I think.
Yeah. Heavyweight's a little extended past 35, but your point about...
But he's going to 205.
205 is, 35 is old.
Not a lot different, but it is different.
100%. No, you make a good point about that. And at the end of the day, Jilton Almeida isn't that guy. He's not Jose Aldo who gets a ton of leeway from UFC. That's not happening. Jose Aldo was the best 145er ever, maybe. Him doing that against Kuniev, who is nowhere near as good as him at striking or at grappling, really. He is way better than Kuniev. And the fact that he came in there as lazy as he was and not working, that's not what the UFC wants, right? It's not what the UFC wants. They want activity, fight, they want violence, and you are anti-violence, therefore you're anti-UFC. Get out.
Any last thoughts on that, Scott?
No, I think Eric got it.
Alrighty. Well, we do not have any fights coming up this weekend. Well, there's a few that Scott's going to talk about in a little bit for one more fight, but any major promotional events, UFC, PFL, all that. So, Scott, I'll throw it over to you for quick hits in MMA news.
Yeah, not too many today. So we have an update on Tom Aspinall, in his unfortunate path back to the cage. He's recovering from the damage from the double eye poke against Ciryl Gane. That fight, of course, being in the no contest. The UFC heavyweight champion, he had surgery on both eyes, according to an Instagram post from his doctors. We're certainly wishing the champ a continued speedy recovery and hopes that he can actually get back into the cage. This will probably be a little more promising, people, but also a little more clear about where we're going with the UFC's White House card. A couple blasts there. TKO CEO Ari Emanuel said on the Pat McAfee show that there will be approximately 6 to 7 fights on this card, smaller card. I think it's intriguing. It's incredibly rare, of course, and seems more feasible for them to put on too, given the unique challenges of staging an event at our nation's capital, where the president lives and sleeps at least a part of the time. Then also another thing with the White House too, Dana White, social media comment posts out there that look, the fights he expects to have dialed in by the weekend. His words, dialed in. Maybe we'll get some real clarity soon. Maybe there's an announcement next week. Maybe it's going to be too much hope on our parts. I don't know. That'll bear monitoring, right? Some updates with John Jones. He's speaking with Helen Yee, says he could be done fighting, and he sure made it sound like that's kind of the direction he's going, that we've seen the last of him in the cage. MMA retirements are what they are. He had a brief one since his last fight that ended very quickly, but this does feel different to me. It almost feels like he really sees the end is here. And then lastly, this is a little bit more interesting, about 326, UFC 326 next month. The final hour of the prelims and the first hour of the main card will be simulcast on CBS. So it's an interesting little experiment. Rather than putting the whole prelims or the whole main card, they're doing a little bit of both. You figure the UFC is probably gonna put their best foot forward, entertainment fights in those for about that little region there. Could be very interesting.
Absolutely. Alrighty.
I
Thank
think
you,
that's
Scott.
stupid personally.
Sorry, what was that?
Stupid personally. Why just an hour?
I think that they got to fit around
Oh,
CBS's
2 hours.
schedule. They got to fit, yeah,
Well,
2
just an
hours.
hour of the main card.
Well, sports going on. They got to fit around CBS's schedule. So I imagine
It's
they
the
were
8 to 10 prime time hour. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's prime time. 10 to 11 is not even worth that much.
8 to 10, right?
8 to 10.
Like
8 to 10.
Yeah, 8 to 10. But after that, 10 to 12. Like, how valuable is that? You know what I mean?
I think the what they're probably trying to do, Eric, is they're trying to
I
make the
understand
product
what
look
they're trying.
cool, and then you go subscribe to it. So it's,
Yes,
I mean,
no,
I
I
get it. It's
I
an
understand the
experiment. Why
goal.
not? Why not?
Nah.
Well, guys, let's
Lame.
get into the final round and talk about some of our homework that we watched. Nick Diaz versus Carlos Condit, home of one of my favorite quotes in a post-fight presser, spinning-ish. Fantastic. I watched it in the fight. It was like Leo DiCaprio in the meme, like, that meme.
Mhm.
Let us know in the comments what you thought about that fight. But Scott, you asked us to score this one. I'll go ahead and give my scorecards. I had it 48-47 Carlos Condit. However, I think the round.
Which rounds?
So yes, so I had the first 2 rounds for Nick Diaz, and I had the last 3 rounds for Carlos Condit. I will say the first round, I was like pretty nervous writing that one down. I was like, I could have gone either way on this one, honestly, but you got to pick one, right? Round 2, I was actually very confident with my scorecard going for Nick Diaz. However, I would have been a dissenting judge on that round, with the way that it actually went. What do you think about that, Scott?
I mean, I'll tell you this: your card is much different than kind of the typical ones that we hear. The main mantra you hear is Diaz 125. That was what came out as. Everyone would say
So I
Diaz
did have
125.
1-2. Okay.
Interesting.
Yes. One
I,
one and two are the
I
rounds,
did not.
and 5 again. I'm not saying I had that, but that is the one that it became a thing. Diaz 125. And look, there's other
Huh.
ways to score this fight. I think it is a very tricky fight to score. So yeah, I was just surprised to hear that's the way you went.
I see. And
I
obviously
had
the 5 makes sense because the back take. But go
5
ahead,
for
Eric.
sure. I had Diaz 135. So I had a
Interesting.
way different scorecard. I had Diaz 135, 1 for sure, and 5 for sure. And then 2 I thought was really close, and 3 I thought was really close. You can go either way, but I had 135, which is interesting.
I guess the reason why I was feeling a little bit on the fence with the first round, because it's sounding like I should not have been. I did pick Diaz for 1, but I did mention, it was a little bit
Close round. No. This is a
Okay.
close round. I went the other way.
Oh, you went Condit
That's
round one.
when people say Diaz 1-2-5, they mean 2 is Diaz, and they pretty feel good about 5 being Diaz because of what happened later in the round.
Yeah.
But 1 is the one that in particular I think a lot of people swung on.
Okay.
I'll tell you, I had Condit 1-3-4, which is a very common score of this fight. This is not like necessarily a definitive fight that most people will watch and say, oh, this is exactly how it was, because it doesn't go in a way that a lot of fights go. You've got Condit, who, when he's getting pressed back against the fence, he just kind of ducks out, and Diaz does nothing to prevent it. So it's like, okay, Diaz is allowing situations to be controlled by Carlos Condit, who's then landing a bunch. Then he moves forward, tries to get his offense on. He's not getting nearly enough before Condit is able to get out and reset and put it where he wants again. He is dictating this fight. Joe Rogan even said it in the middle of the fight. He's like, this is Carlos Condit's doing what he wants to do more than Nick Diaz is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I mean, besides the scoring, which
Tough one to
was
score.
very interesting.
Tough one to score, man.
it
I
makes it more fun.
had Diaz.
Sure is.
I think scoring does make it more fun. It makes it a little bit more interesting. But besides that, I feel like it was a solid fight in general. Like, these guys were...
Neat fight.
Neat fight, yeah.
You know what I like about Nick? Nick is a little bit different than Nate, where Nick doesn't start slow like Nate did when he was in like his peak. Like Nate was always like slow starter, come on 3, 4, 5. Nick was he was able to come out of the gate pretty hot, which was I enjoyed.
Well, Scott, what do we have up next for our next homework assignment?
I'm giving you, because we don't have any major MMA this weekend, I'm going to give you a trilogy of fights. I'm going with the Cain Velasquez versus Junior Dos Santos trilogy from 2011 on Fox, 2012 at UFC 155, and 2013 at UFC 166. This was basically the heavyweight saga for almost exactly 2 years. There were some title fights in the middle, so it wasn't like one then the other than the other. But I don't know if I need much more setup than that. Just watch a couple of heavyweight titans from about 15 years ago, 14, 13 years ago, duke it out.
This will be a nice change of pace from the heavyweight bouts that we're getting today. I feel like.
Hopefully.
Yes.
I mean, they are, and you'll see.
Okay, I'm excited for that one. And Scott, I'll throw it right back to you. What happened this week in MMA?
We're going 15 years back, February 12th, 2011. Fedor Emelianenko was stopped by Antonio Bigfoot Silva and eliminated from the Strikeforce World Heavyweight Grand Prix. It was Fedor's second loss in a row after going unbeaten for nearly 10 whole years. I was there in the Meadowlands covering that fight. It was my first on-site MMA event in a media capacity. I actually went to UFC 128, covered that one the following month. So, but this was actually where I got my first on-site coverage of MMA.
Wow. All
That's
right.
crazy.
You could have just
That's
said that.
nuts.
This week in
Congratulations.
MMA was Scott Fontana's first major MMA
Yeah,
event.
that's the this week in
I
MMA.
buried the lead,
That's
maybe.
unbelievable.
Yeah. Alrighty, Scott,
Covering
take us home.
Strikeforce, you're such an OG.
He is an OG.
That's awesome.
Lastly, I am an OG. A lot of old there. The one more fight I'm going to give you, they're really just, like I said, there's not a whole lot going on this weekend. It's almost a barren landscape as far as notable ranked fighters. I'm going a little deeper here, but it's a promotion we've talked about before, Octagon. You have Octagon number 84 in Czech Republic, where they're based out of. You can start tuning in noon Saturday, watch it on Octagon TV. That's their little pay-per-view portion. You'll have to watch it from there. But the main fight here is a vacant welterweight title fight between Ronald Pardezer and Kayuk Brito. I'm sure I'm butchering both names, but they are ranked number 64 and 91 respectively at welterweight. It's like our only top 100 versus top 100 fight all weekend. It's very,
That's
very
crazy.
All right. Well, there is certainly a shortage of MMA fights this weekend, so if you're looking for one...
On the men's side, I should say, there are some women's fights that are, top one, but we're talking about very low levels of talent pool here. I'm talking like there's like a 48th ranked woman who's had 2 fights or something like that at a women's bantamweight. It's just that they don't have the same level of participation.
Yeah, very fair. So, I mean, if you are looking for a fight to watch in this weekend with not a lot of fights out there you go. That's the one to watch. We'll see you guys next week. This weekend, if you are celebrating Valentine's Day, happy Valentine's Day.
Call your mom.
Call your mom always. I mean, not even just this weekend, but just in general. Scott, Erich, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for joining us at home, and we will see you on the next one. Look at those pearly whites. Adios.